This is not just a story. This is revenge.
The photo came in at 11:47 p.m. I was sitting in my car, in a parking lot, eating cold fries, waiting for a text from the woman I hired to test my fiancé. And the text came. But it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't remotely what I expected. She didn't send me a screenshot of some flirty DM. She didn't send me a voice note of him asking for her number. She sent me a photo, a clear, wide-angle photo, of my fiancé sitting at a kitchen table, laughing in my parents' house, with my mother. And between them, spread across the table like some kind of sick craft project, were my childhood photos, not copies. Originals. The ones from the albums my mom kept in the hall closet, the ones I used to flip through as a kid. I sat there in that parking lot for 22 minutes before I could breathe normally again. And I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I'm not an angry person. I'm really not. But by the time this was all over, I made sure every single person at that engagement party got a folder. Let me back up. Because to understand what happened that night, you first have to understand what I thought my life was. His name was Derek. And look, I'm not gonna sit here and trash him the whole video, because honestly, for the first year and a half, Derek was amazing. He was funny. He remembered the little stuff, like how I take my coffee, or that I can't watch horror movies before bed, or that my dad's birthday is kind of a big deal in our house. He showed up. Every time. We met through mutual friends at a cookout. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. He dropped a chip. I laughed at him. He asked for my number. That was it. By month 4, I was calling him my boyfriend. By month 14, I was trying on rings with my best friend on a random Tuesday because I knew. I just knew. This was the guy. And when he proposed on a Thursday night at home, no big production, just candles and takeout and the most nervous I'd ever seen him, I said yes before he finished the sentence. My family loved him, especially my mom. Especially my mom, which, at the time, felt like the biggest blessing of my life. My mom is not easy to impress. She's warm, she's funny, but she has this radar, right? She reads people. She always has. So when she pulled me aside after Derek's first family dinner and said, "This one's different, baby. Keep him," I felt like I'd won something. I felt chosen. I held on to that feeling for a long time. Too long. The first thing I noticed, and I brushed it off, which I hate myself for, was the phone stuff. Not that Derek was on his phone too much. He wasn't. It was the opposite. He was really careful about his phone. Like he would never leave it on the table face up. Always face down. Always. He'd take it with him when he went to the kitchen. He'd laugh it off if I looked over his shoulder, "Babe, you snoopin'?" Just playful enough that I felt embarrassed for noticing. But I noticed. And then there was the money thing. Derek had a good job. Solid income. We'd talked about finances before. We were engaged. And everything checked out. He was responsible. He saved. He wasn't flashy. But around month 7 of our engagement, I started seeing little things. He'd pick up a check at dinner, and I'd catch this flicker across his face, like he was calculating something. A micro-expression, gone before I could read it. He stopped talking about our future apartment. He got weird about the wedding budget. Not combative, not defensive, just vague. "We've got time, babe. I'll handle it, don't stress. Let's just enjoy being engaged for a minute." And because I loved him, I let it go. Every single time, I let it go. My best friend, Jade, was the one who finally said what I wouldn't. We were getting pedicures, and Jade doesn't do anything subtly. She just comes right out with it. She looked at me and said, "Girl, what does Derek actually do with his money?" And I laughed. I genuinely laughed. "He saves it, Jade. He's responsible." She looked at me with that face. You know the face. The "I love you, but you're being an idiot" face. I went home that night and I couldn't sleep. What does Derek do with his money? I told myself I was just being paranoid. But then, I found the app. 3 days later, I was using Derek's iPad to look something up. He'd literally handed it to me, and a notification popped up from an app I didn't recognize. It wasn't a dating app. Nothing like that. It was a messaging app. An encrypted one. The kind you use when you don't want a record. I looked at that notification for maybe 2 seconds before the screen locked. I didn't say anything to Derek. Instead, I did something I'm not totally proud of. I downloaded the same app on my own phone and did some research. That app, it was mostly used for 3 things. People who were very serious about privacy, people who were having affairs, and people who were running some kind of scheme. I sat with that information for a week. And then I made the worst decision I could have made. I decided to run a loyalty test. Now I need to pause here and be honest with you. Loyalty testers are a whole thing. You can find them on social media, you can find services online. Basically, you pay someone attractive to slide into your partner's DMs, flirt a little, see if they bite. It's messy, it's ethically gray. And if I could go back, I'd do it differently. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. I was in love with someone I was starting to not recognize, and I needed to know if my gut was right. So I found someone. A woman named Camille. She had an Instagram, a following, a whole professional setup. She did this for people. Said she'd been doing it for 2 years. She had testimonials. I paid her $400. I gave her Derek's Instagram handle, his Facebook, his Snapchat. I told her to reach out casually, not aggressively. Just see if he engaged. See if he crossed a line. She said she'd update me within 72 hours. And then I waited. The first day, nothing. He didn't respond to her follow request. The second day, he accepted, but no DM. The third day, she messaged him. Casual opener. Compliment on one of his posts. He responded. And then I stopped sleeping. She was feeding me updates. Nothing alarming yet, he was being friendly, not inappropriate. But he was engaging. He was in there. By day 5, the tone had shifted enough that my stomach was in knots, and that's when she went quiet on me. I didn't hear from Camille for almost 18 hours. And then my phone lit up. And my whole world tilted. 11:47 p.m. The photo. My fiancé, my mother, my childhood photos. That kitchen table. I typed back to Camille immediately. What is this? Where are you? What is happening? She called me, first time she'd called instead of texting. Her voice was calm, professional. More professional than it had been this whole time. And she said something I will never forget. I need you to not freak out. And I need you to understand that I am not just a loyalty tester. My name is Camille Webb. I'm a licensed private investigator. And your father hired me 6 weeks ago. I'm gonna need you to sit with that for a second. My father hired her 6 weeks ago. While I was paying Camille $400 to slide into my fiancé's DMs, she was already inside, already investigating, already had a file. And my dad knew. My father, quiet, careful, never stirs the pot. That man had gone and hired a private investigator because he suspected something was very, very wrong. I called him. Right then. 11:52 at night, he answered on the first ring, which told me he was awake, which told me he'd been waiting. And I said, Dad, what is going on? Long pause. And then he said, come to the house. Don't call your mother. Don't say anything to Derek. Just come. I drove in a daze. 22 minutes. Every traffic light felt personal. When I walked in, my dad was at the kitchen table, which, and this hit me, was the same table from the photo. The same one where Derek and my mother had been sitting with my childhood photos spread out between them. I sat down across from my dad. And for the next 2 hours, Camille walked me through everything. Here's what was actually happening. My mother, and Derek had been running a catfishing operation. Not a small one, not a desperate one-time thing, a business. They had been doing it for almost 3 years. The scheme was calculated and cruel in a way that still makes me nauseous to explain. They'd create fake profiles on senior-focused dating sites and social platforms, Facebook groups for retirees, grief support communities, widower forums. And the profiles weren't random stock photos or stolen influencer pics. They were me. My childhood photos. My teenage photos. Edited, cropped, aged up or down depending on the target. They built entire fictional women out of my face. One profile was a woman named Sandra, mid-30s, recently divorced, looking for a mature connection. Another was Lee, early 40s, widowed, just moved back to a small town. There were at least 6 profiles. 6 women, all built from my photos. All operated by Derek and my mother, working in rotation. They'd build relationships with lonely retirees, older men, mostly. Widowers, men who'd lost their wives, and were reaching out for connection, for warmth, for something real. They'd get these men emotionally invested over weeks, sometimes months. And then, the ask would come, a medical emergency, car trouble, a grandchild's tuition, a plane ticket to finally come meet you. The amounts ranged from $800 to, and this one made my chest hurt, $14,000 from a 73-year-old man in Ohio who thought he was helping the woman he'd fallen in love with pay for her mother's hospital bills. A 73-year-old widower sending money to a fake profile built from my face. I sat at that table, and I felt something I don't have a good word for. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just rage. It was contamination. Like something had been done to me that I hadn't consented to. Like my identity had been borrowed and weaponized against people who deserved nothing but kindness. And it had been done by the 2 people who were supposed to love me most. But here's the part that really broke something in me. This wasn't new. My dad had suspected something for over a year. My dad had started noticing things about 14 months prior. Small things at first. My mother having cash he couldn't account for. Secretive phone behavior. Derek over at the house when my dad was at work. Derek, who had no real reason to be there. Then, my dad noticed a photo album missing from the hall closet. He'd thought it was misplaced. He found it 6 weeks later, with pages missing. Photos removed cleanly, like they'd been peeled out carefully. That's when he got scared. He didn't confront my mother. He's methodical, cautious. He said to me that night, I needed to know the full shape of it before I touched anything. So he called a pie. He called Camille. And Camille, being very good at her job, had spent 6 weeks building a picture that was even worse than my father feared. The operation had generated, at minimum, $64,000 in the past 3 years. $64,000. Stolen from lonely, grieving, vulnerable people. Using my face. My dad slid a folder across the table to me. Inside, printed screenshots, bank records, transaction histories, testimonials from victims that Camille had tracked down and spoken to, gently, professionally, with their permission. One man had written a statement. He said he'd been talking to Sandra for 4 months. He'd sent money 3 times. When Sandra suddenly disappeared, he didn't report it. He said he was too embarrassed. He said he thought he'd been foolish to believe someone like her could love someone like him. I read that statement, and I cried. First time I cried that whole night. My dad put his hand on mine and didn't say anything. And I sat there, in that kitchen, at that table, and I decided something. This was not going to be the ending. This was going to be the beginning. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I am not a chaotic person. I am not impulsive. I don't flip tables, I don't send unhinged texts, I don't burn things down. When I'm really hurt, I mean really hurt, I get quiet, I get organized. And I had the best possible partner in this. Because my father? Same way. Methodical, patient, precise. And we had Camille, a licensed PI with a complete file, documentation, verified evidence, and contacts in law enforcement she'd already been in preliminary communication with. The three of us sat in that kitchen until almost 3 a.m. And we made a plan. Here was the situation we were working with. Derek and my mother did not know that we knew. The engagement party, which my mother had enthusiastically offered to plan, which now made me want to laugh until I cried, was scheduled for 3 weeks out. We had already sent invitations, 61 people, family, friends, my parents' friends, Derek's family, co-workers. My mother had framed the whole party as a gift, a celebration. She'd insisted on handling every detail. Now I understood why. A party meant access to people. It meant a moment where she and Derek were at the center, celebrated, trusted. My father looked at me across that table and said quietly, "What do you want to do?" And here's the thing. I could have called the police right then. I could have confronted Derek that night. I could have exploded. But if I did that, Derek and my mother could lawyer up, delete evidence, coordinate stories, and victims might never get their money back or their dignity acknowledged. If I was going to do this right, if I was going to do it for that man in Ohio who sent $14,000 because he thought someone loved him, I needed to do it in a way that was airtight. So I said, "We wait. We use the party." My dad nodded. Camille smiled. Just barely. The next 3 weeks were the most surreal of my life. I went home that night. I got into bed next to Derek. He put his arm around me in his sleep. I stared at the ceiling. I showed up at brunch with my mother on Sunday and let her hug me and call me my baby and talk about centerpieces and champagne choices. I smiled. I nodded. I asked questions about the floral arrangements. I want you to understand how much that cost me. But I needed them comfortable. I needed them to feel like everything was normal. Because the moment they got spooked, it was over. Meanwhile, underneath, the machine was running. Camille was working with a federal contact at the FBI's cybercrime division. Romance fraud involving wire transfers across state lines is a federal matter. She'd already built a case strong enough for a preliminary inquiry. My father had quietly consulted with a family attorney about our legal exposure, whether anything we'd done in gathering evidence could be challenged. Answer: no. Camille was licensed, the investigation was legitimate, and nothing had been obtained illegally. We had $64,000 in documented fraud. We had 6 fake profiles. We had victim statements. We had bank records. We had Derek's messages, pulled from a recovery during a consent search of a device I won't get into on here. Let's just say Camille was thorough. And we had something else. We had Derek's family. Because here's the thing Derek apparently never considered. His own sister, Renata, had no idea. His parents had no idea. His whole family thought he was this solid, stand-up guy who was marrying a good woman. Camille had quietly reached out to Renata, not with details, just a gentle, before the engagement party, "There's something you need to know. Can we talk?" Renata met with Camille 2 weeks before the party, and Renata, bless her, showed up. So here's how we set it up, and I need you to understand, every single detail was deliberate. The party was at my parents' house. My mother had, helpfully, insisted on that. We let her plan the whole thing, every decoration, every playlist choice, every appetizer. She was so proud. She was glowing. 3 days before the party, Camille delivered the final folders. 61 guests were coming. We prepared, and I am not exaggerating, 61 folders. Each one had a cover page explaining what the folder contained and why it was being distributed. A summary of the fraud scheme, written clearly, without legal jargon. Key screenshots. A list of known victims. The documented financial total. and the name and contact information of the FBI agent handling the case, along with a note that charges had already been filed. No graphic details. Nothing salacious. Just facts. Clean, clear, devastating facts. We coordinated with the FBI on timing. They weren't going to crash the party. There wasn't going to be a dramatic arrest in front of everyone. The agent was very clear. The evidence was sufficient, charges were filed, and there would be time for everything to process properly. But he confirmed the case was active as of that morning. It was real. We hid the folders at the venue in boxes that looked like party supply storage, tucked behind the gift table until it was time. Renata knew. She was quiet, furious, and ready. My dad was steady, like he always is, like bedrock. Jade knew. She'd cried with me for 2 hours the night I told her, and then she dried her eyes and said, "Tell me what to do." And Camille was there too, as a guest, my friend from work. Because sometimes pies finish what they start. I got dressed for the party in the bathroom of my childhood home while my mother knocked on the door and asked if I wanted to borrow her pearl earrings. I said yes. I wore her pearl earrings. And I walked out to greet the guests. The first hour of that party was almost peaceful. People laughed, they hugged, they clinked glasses. Derek's mom grabbed my hands and told me how happy she was. Derek's dad shook my father's hand and said something about welcoming me to the family. I watched my mother work the room. She was in her element, poised, warm, telling stories that made people laugh, refilling glasses, steering people toward the appetizers. She caught my eye across the room at one point and mouthed, "You okay?" I smiled and mouthed back, "Perfect." Derek found me near the back of the room. He kissed my cheek. He smelled like the cologne I'd bought him for Christmas. He said, "You look beautiful." I said, "Thank you, babe." I held it together. At the 90-minute mark, my dad caught my eye from across the room. A small nod. I nodded back. He went to the gift table. He opened the first box. Jade moved to the second. Renata positioned herself near Derek's parents. Camille was near the door. My dad tapped his champagne glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The room settled. People smiled, expecting a toast. First of all, thank you all for being here. It means everything to our family to have you with us tonight, and I want to make sure everyone leaves tonight with a little something to take home. He paused. We're going to pass around some folders. I ask that you hold off on opening them until I give the word. Just hold on to them for a moment. Murmurs. Curious smiles. People assuming it was something cute. A memory book, maybe? A wedding timeline. Jade moved through the room. Renata moved through Derek's side. Two of my dad's friends, who we'd quietly briefed, both retired, both trusted, helped distribute. 61 folders. Everyone had one. My father let the moment breathe. 10 full seconds of silence. Then he said, "You can open them now." The sound of 61 folders opening at the same time is something I won't forget. Then the silence. The kind of silence that has weight. And then a sound I also won't forget. It was Derek's mother. She made a sound that wasn't a word, just a sound. Low, involuntary. My mother looked up from her folder. She looked at me, and I looked at her. And I held her gaze. I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. And I think that's the moment she understood it was over. Derek had gone white. He was standing in the center of the room, holding his folder, and he looked like the floor had dissolved under him. His father said, quietly, almost to himself, "What is this?" It wasn't a question. It was a reckoning. Renata walked up to her brother. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She just looked at him and said, loud enough for the people around her to hear, "I want you to know that I am disgusted. And I will not be defending you." She walked out. A few other guests followed. Not all at once. Quietly, one by one, people set their folders down or took them with them and made their exits. Derek tried to say something to me. I held up my hand. Don't. Just that one word. He stopped. My mother tried to say my name. Don't. Same word. Same voice. She stopped too. I picked up my champagne glass. I walked to the center of the room, to the spot where my dad had been standing, and I looked around at the people who were still there, the ones who had chosen to stay, and I said, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." But I needed witnesses. I needed people who loved us, and I use that word loosely tonight to understand what was done, not just to me, but to $64,000 worth of people who deserved better. I set my glass down. The FBI case number is on the last page of your folder if you have questions about what comes next. The agent's contact information is there too. I looked at Derek one last time. The engagement is off. The attorney has already been contacted. Don't call me. And I walked out of my parents' house. My dad walked out with me. He didn't say anything. He just held the door. The months after that were not easy. I want to be honest about that. People expect the revenge to be the ending, but the aftermath is its own kind of survival. Derek didn't fight it. There wasn't much he could fight. His attorney advised him to cooperate, which, from what I understand, he did. The federal case moved forward. There were plea discussions. I wasn't part of those conversations, and I didn't try to be. My mother hired a lawyer within 48 hours of the party. She has not called me since. I don't know if that's her choice or her attorney's advice. I genuinely don't know how I feel about that. Some days the silence feels like mercy. Other days it feels like a door that's been locked from the inside and I don't have the key. My father and I talk more now than we ever have. He came to find me about a week after the party. We sat in his car in a parking lot, which felt fitting, and he told me something I keep coming back to. He said, "I didn't do any of this because I was angry. I did it because you deserved to know the truth before you built your whole life on a lie." I think about that a lot. He also told me he'd been holding the weight of suspicion for over a year, trying to figure out how to protect me without destroying me. I don't know how he did that. I genuinely don't know how he sat across dinner tables and holidays and Sunday afternoons carrying that and still showed up the way he did. My father is one of the strongest people I know. And I didn't fully see it until all of this. The victims. This is what I actually lose sleep over. Camille stayed in contact with several of the victims throughout the investigation. With their permission, she shared updates with me, not identifying details, just that they were being heard, that the case was real, that they weren't alone in what had happened to them. One of them, the man in Ohio, apparently said that he was grateful. Not grateful that he'd been defrauded, grateful that someone had found out and done something. That his experience had mattered enough for someone to pursue it. That broke me a little. And also fixed me a little. As for Derek, I've been asked 100 times what I feel about him. Honestly, right now, I feel the clearest I've ever felt in my life. I'm not angry. I got through that phase pretty fast, actually. Anger takes up a lot of space, and I needed that space back. I'm not sad, at least not for the relationship. I'm sad for what I thought the relationship was, the version of it that lived in my head and apparently never existed in reality. What I am is grateful. Grateful that I found out. Grateful that my dad trusted his gut. Grateful that Camille was as thorough and as principled as she was. Grateful that Jade showed up in that room with folders like the absolute legend she is. Grateful that I got to look my mother in the eye in that room and hold her gaze, because that moment, that held gaze, was mine. Nobody could take that from me. Not a lawyer, not a court date, not a plea deal. That moment was the truth, and we both knew it, and the room knew it, and that was enough. I'm not the person I was before all of this. I was naive, not in a stupid way, in a trusting way, which I still believe is a decent way to be. I led with love. I wanted to see the best in the people closest to me. But now I also know this. Love doesn't make you blind. Love just makes you willing to look away. and I'm done looking away. If you've made it this far, thank you. I know that was a lot. It was a lot to live, and I imagine it was a lot to listen to. I've debated telling this story publicly for months. What stopped me for a long time was this fear that people would focus on the drama, the party, the folders, the looks across the room, and miss what the story is actually about. It's about the quiet ones. My dad, holding the weight of suspicion for a year because he loved me enough to get it right. Renata, who barely knew me, showing up anyway because she had a conscience. The man in Ohio who was too embarrassed to report what happened to him, because shame is what these schemes count on. Camille, who could have just cashed my $400 and done the loyalty test gig and been done with it, but who took this thing seriously because that's who she is. Those are the people this story is about. Not Derek. Not even my mother. Them. I'm doing okay. Not perfectly. But okay. And okay, right now, is more than enough. So here's what I want to know. And I really do want to know. I read every comment. Do you think there's ever a version of forgiveness that makes sense in a situation like this? Not for them. I mean forgiveness for yourself. Like forgiving yourself for not seeing it sooner. For trusting. For loving people who didn't earn it. Or do you think some things you just carry and that's fine too? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely asking. And if this story resonated with you, or if you've been through something like it, on any scale, share this video. Because somewhere out there, there's someone who needs to know that getting quiet isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes getting quiet is how you get ready. Subscribe if you're new, more real stories, every week. Links in the description for romance fraud reporting resources and support. Take care of yourselves.